the schedule tomorrow morning from 9 a.m. to 12 a.m., a moderated discussion where we would like to hear from everyone in terms of how to move forward following this event. There was a question posed by our dear Buddhist, respected, venerable friend from Malaysia in terms of how to proceed in terms of concrete actions related to education and so forth. We hope that everyone will attend the planning consultation tomorrow. We're also, as you know, this event is also supported by Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Religious Affairs, and civilizations built on division of labor. We very much appreciate the suggestion by our friend from Malaysia. How do we move forward in various regards, including engaging with educational curricula? And we will also, hopefully, Pak Muksin will be with us tomorrow and can hear the thoughts of our dear religious leaders and then also provide advice from a practical foreign policy perspective in moving this agenda forward. So today we'll be looking at the issues this afternoon, restoring civilizational connectivity, not only within ASEAN, within Southeast Asia, but with South Asia, and then global interfaith and intercultural connectivity, and looking at from the issue of from ASEAN to the world, because we believe that what ASEAN has in terms of its civilizational heritage, the civilizational heritage of the Indo-Pacific, is of immense relevance to the world today, a world increasingly racked by conflict and conflict between great power blocs. This region of the world may offer a path out of difficulty, and we would like to examine that briefly in this next session. So if I may invite our panelists to come to the forefront here, Pak Sidharto from Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Pak Gusmão, Martinho Gusmão from Timor-Leste, and Sheikh Salman Chishti from India. You may sit here and I will introduce the three panelists and then ask each of them a question. Going from right to left, Pak Sidharto, Reza Suryodipuro, my comrade, I like to call him Romo or father, but he informs me it's not appropriate because he is no longer a priest, but he is our beloved comrade from Timor-Leste, and Sheikh Salman Chishti. Bapa Sidharto really embodies within his very DNA the civilizational connectivity of ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific region. If I comment briefly, in Javanese, the letter A transmits to O. Sidharto would be understood by Indians as Siddhartha. His middle name is Reza, which is obviously an Islamic name, but not just purely and solely an Arabic name, but also with a Persian flavor. And his last name, Suryodipuro, Surya is obviously a Hindu divinity. And so this gentleman has names which are Buddhist, Muslim, and Hindu, and they are right there within his physiology. He was born in Bonn, Germany, I believe. He studied in the United States. He has served as ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia, the deputy ambassador to the United States, and as ambassador to the Republic of India, and currently serves as the Director General of ASEAN for the Indonesian Foreign Ministry. Martinho Gusmão is the advisor to the President of Timor-Leste, which will be the 11th member of ASEAN. And the President of Timor-Leste is, most of you may know, and if not, I'm sure you'll be happy to know, Jose Ramos Horta is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And Timor-Leste will be the second Catholic majority country coming into ASEAN. And as an advisor to President Ramos Horta, Mr. Gusmão is also leading efforts to integrate the document on human fraternity not only into the Timor-Leste school system, but also engagement worldwide in this regard. And our third speaker is from technically outside ASEAN, well, certainly outside of ASEAN, but very much within the Indo-Pacific area, Sheikh Salman Chishti. He is a lineal descendant of a very great Sufi saint who lived 800 years ago in India. There are 7 families that are the custodians of Ajmer Sharif, where Sheikh Chishti is buried. To give you an idea of the significance of Sheikh Chishti, he was the patron saint of the Mughal dynasty. Hundreds of years ago, the Mughal kings gave 5,000 villages to help maintain and upkeep of Ajmer Sharif. With Indian independence, those villages were separated from Ajmer Sharif, but today the government of India actually provides the economic support for the millions and millions and millions of pilgrims who come to Ajmer Sharif, up to hundreds of thousands, up to 1 million a day, who come to this site. So we're very fortunate to have these 3 gentlemen with us. I will pose my first question to Bapak Sidharto, and I would like to ask, following on our discussion today, 2 questions. The first regarding how we can build civilizational connectivity across the cultures and countries within ASEAN, but even more so, what would be the geopolitical consequences of the reemergence? We know that ASEAN has established political connectivity. We know that ASEAN has established economic connectivity. In principle, there's a 3rd pillar in terms of social and cultural, but we have not yet seen a full blossoming of religious interconnectivity among the different communities within ASEAN. In your opinion, Bapak Sidharto, how can we help bring about this civilizational interconnectivity within ASEAN, and what would be the consequences for the world at large?
Thank you, Pa Holland. Thank you to Nahdlatul Ulama for having me here. Also, I followed all discussions since morning. Initially, I thought I was a bit out of place because most of the speakers are religious leaders. I think I'm far from being a leader or even being religious. But I was listening intently to Professor Marianne Glendon earlier, and I think putting your question also in the context of what's happening in the world. And I think Professor Glendon also talked earlier about what I understood as the evolution of the liberal ideology, where the liberal order is today, and then where religion comes in. I think the important part of Southeast Asia, it would appear to me, but I stand to be corrected, but I know definitely from Indonesia's own history, that religion has always been part of the state, of nation state building. And I think this may also be the case with other Southeast Asian countries. And I think because going back, so before talking about today, in history, Southeast Asia as a crossroad in which all kinds of influence, maritime crossroad, bringing in trade, bringing in influence, it has mixed so freely, has also shaped the way we look at religion. We don't lose religiosity from those mixtures, but it becomes more of an amalgamation. We don't lose identity, but we become more tolerant. And this is from experience in India. Coming to India, it was most natural for me to be called Sidharto, as you mentioned earlier, Paolan. Initially, it was a surprise to me why so many Indians would find that as a wonder that a Muslim would be called Sidharto. And it only came to me how in India, religion was part of the identity, but not in our case. I think this is because of the region being part of this crossroad, and also the interaction between Southeast Asian countries have been quite intense. And this effort, sense of identity, not as part of the Chinese or the Indian civilization, although much influenced, I think there is that part of common Southeast Asian identity building. And then for today, into the geopolitics of today. Again, it is this being the crossroad of the region's geopolitics, the world even. I would argue that the prosperity and the security of the major countries today depend on access to and access through the region. So it is a challenge for the region to maintain its unity and centrality, and it will be a unity that has to be based on a common identity. There is that need to build identity based on history. At the same time, what I sense from all my colleagues in ASEAN, it is also an identity based on the wish not to repeat the traumas of the Cold War. So there is that wish to remain united in spite of the geopolitics, the geostrategic dynamics that is taking place. And looking forward, it is also the nature of the geography that will determine Southeast Asian countries to establish, at least what I would hope it to be, its own maritime governance to govern this maritime crossroad. Which is interestingly, because before the period of colonialism, there was also a form of maritime governance based on local kingdoms, local empires. India was part of it, Sriwijaya, Majapahit. So I think this will be the way forward. And I also think, Pa Holland, that what we in ASEAN may be able to develop can also help countries, the other major powers, also find an operating place that is friendlier to them. It is not a situation where it is you are forced to choose between A and B, but you have an alternative. So let me stop there and look forward to further discussions.
Thank you very much, Papa. My next question will be for Martinho Gusmão. As a brief preparatory note, in 1984, Nahdlatul Ulama had a meeting at which the chairman of Nahdlatul Ulama brought forward a concept with which Mr. Martinho Gusmão is familiar with and working on today, but also many people in other parts of the world are not aware of this. In Islam, there's a term, Ukhuwah Islamiyya, which refers to the fraternity of Muslims. Nahdlatul Ulama came up with the concept of Ukhuwah Wataniyya, the brotherhood of citizens of a state. But then in 1984, Nahdlatul Ulama also came up with the concept of Ukhuwah Bashariyya, Ukhuwah Insaniyya, the fraternity of all humanity. And Nahdlatul Ulama came up with this concept specifically at a time in 1984 when it was very important in Indonesia for Islam to come forward and defend the principle of Pancasila. And so, as I mentioned, Mr. Gusmão is deeply involved with the document on human fraternity that was signed in Abu Dhabi by Pope Francis and by Sheikh Ahmed al-Taib of Al-Azhar. And in speaking with Mr. Gusmão yesterday, he made a very interesting observation that if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience today, the question, how do we move from human rights to human fraternity? And if you could also speak briefly about the significance of this and the need for this, as well as how to implement human fraternity, because I believe that Mr. Gusmão and President Ramos Horta and the government of Timor-Leste are taking a leading role in the world today precisely in this area. If you would enlighten us, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for Nahdlatul Ulama to invest this trust to me to speak in this forum. Yesterday, when we talked about how to move from human fraternity, from human rights to human fraternity. For this, I'm grateful for Emerit Professor Mary, which provide a preliminary and fairly the integrative approach, how human rights today go into the crisis. What we call as Universal Declaration of Human Fraternity is almost unfairly become, it's quite ununiversal. So Pope Francis in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti say that we are not enough universal to implement this declaration. Interestingly enough, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in Article 1, it is mentioned like this, and I quote, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act toward one another in a spirit of fraternity." I'm wondering, for almost 78 years, this expression of spirit of fraternity almost covered by human rights. So if we see this, in my humble opinion, fraternity is the oldest fashion in political studies. If we go back to classical study, Aristotle's already mentioned, and I quote, "Zon politikon arise in family connection, fratries, brotherhood, common sacrifice, amusement, which draw men together." And if we go to the history again, in 1789, there were French Revolution. They mentioned about liberté, égalité, et fraternité. Interestingly that in the course of history, liberté lead us to liberalism until to the extreme of libertarianism, while égalité bring us to socialism and communism and so and so. The question is, where is fraternity belong? It is like disappear in the history of political thought. So this is the time when we come back to the age of fraternity. You mentioned about the document of human fraternity signed by His Holiness Pope Francis and His Eminence Ahmad Al-Tayeb. The interesting point is that that document signal the 800 years of celebration, the myth of Saint Francis and the Sultan Al-Malik Al-Kamal. So it seems that Catholic Church reopened his suggestion, where in French Revolution, the so-called patriotic priest suggests that in spite of liberty and equality, we should promote fraternity. I think fraternity is disappeared from political studies because it is almost or strongly influenced by Christian concepts. So in French Revolution, they think that, well, Christianity must put aside and religious notion must be put aside. We go to more secularism in a way that in the course of history, people never come back to fraternity. I think the Universal Declaration of Human Rights come after the, contradiction between left and right, religious and unreligious. Then the declaration put in the center the spirit of fraternity. And while now human rights is almost quiet create a lot of problem, a lot of crisis in our identity, then fraternity become a new approach to our crisis of today. I want to mention one thing more, that frequently in fraternity's symptomatic term that appears 26 times in the Second Vatican Council documents, of which 12 in the Gaudium et Spes. I like the quote like this: according to the Conciliar Father, Catholic Church proclaiming the noble destiny of man and championing the godlike seed which has been sown in him, offered to mankind the honest assistance of the Church in fostering that brotherhood of all men which corresponded to this destiny of theirs. This worldly life is spatium vere fraternitatis. It's like our world of today is the space, the truly space for fraternity. This is the new tendency, the new study in Catholic Church to move to human fraternity. Now, if you ask, how do we implement this human fraternity in our society? As Timor-Leste, influenced very much by Brazilian theology of liberation, we hear from Paulo Freire of pedagogia da libertação, pedagogia dos oprimidos. I remember that one of the book translated in Indonesia, if I'm correct, it was like prefaced by Gus Dur. And now in Timor-Leste, we are trying our best to create pedagogia da Irmandade. Now, the word Irmandade is from Portuguese. It is like adjective of irmão, means sister, and irmão means brother. So in Irmandade, there is no difference between man and woman. It is like equal for all. I put this because many writers from English speakers, especially from United States and German, they question about the concept human fraternity, which associated overall to men and put aside women. In French, they want to adopt the other term in Greek, adolphite, which is the same meaning with fraternité. But anyway, I'm happy to show that in Portuguese language, this is Irmandade, like in Spanish, Hermandad. Already in the word, we find the balance between men and women in integrative. For this effort of pedagogia da Irmandade, I mentioned 5 points which are very important to deal with. The first one is educated for democratic culture. This concept is inside our constitution. I think we cannot, develop democracy without come into the culture. And the culture will be like always in crisis without democracy approach. And in this situation, I think interreligious and intercultural approach, it's one of the most formidable point to move forward. And I thank for you, for NU, because in Timor-Leste, many Muslim community there, they want to bound themselves back to NU. And I just mentioned one thing, that in Dili, the Muslim community opened the schools, but most of the students come from Catholic, not Muslim. That's interesting. The second point, which I observed during our seminar today, we need to distinguish between having religion and being religious. I think most of the conflict arrive in our society today because we are strongly bound to having religion. I have Catholic, what do you want? You have Islam, what do you want? So we are come to the conflict of institution. But when we go to the grassroots level, people live in peaceful way, accept to each other in the difference between their style of life and retain that they are brother and sister. So this may be, we go forward to discuss in very detail and in very discerning way. So these 2 points which I want to share with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Our third speaker is Sheikh Salman Chishti. He raised a very interesting question in an earlier panel, asking about spiritual unity. And from what little I know about the tradition of the Chishtiya order, the Sufi order in India, Sheikh Chishti, who founded that order, its continuity through the centuries. From our perspective here in Indonesia, your movement, which has millions, if not tens of millions of followers within India, appears to be very much not only an expression of unity within diversity within India, but also very much a continuity within India, within a Muslim tradition of what our venerable monk Fra Neo Sakya was referring to in terms of the Ashoka legacy. And so if you would elaborate for us what you mean yourself by spiritual unity and what your experience is within your tradition of the coming together within a site of pilgrimage of Hindus and Sikh and Jain and Muslims, and also how you perceive the significance of what is emerging within ASEAN, within Indonesia, within Nahdlatul, but within ASEAN as a whole and its ramifications for India.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله شكر الله صلوات رسول الله Assalamu alaikum ya Sayyid al-Mursaleen wa rahmatul lil alameen. Greeting of peace, and again our gratitude, profound gratitude to Nahdlatul Ulama, the senior leadership, Chairman Janab Haji Kholil Yahya Sahab, and the senior leadership as well as the Foreign Ministry of Indonesia for really bringing together a much important and much needed initiative, a dialogue which continued in the form of G20, the religious forum, and that Nahdlatul Ulama is really putting together things not only for the ASEAN region, but South Asia, but a message to the world from Indonesia. So I extend our greetings to our co-panelists, Ambassador Sidharto, Father Martinho, and Haji Holland. I think the important initiative, what you talked about since yesterday and today morning, the deliberation, especially with the presence of ASEAN region and coming from India, coming from Ajmer Sharif, which you just mentioned about the significance of place, which resonate to human fraternity. As just Father Martinho mentioned about this human fraternity, the Ajmer Sharif in India is a place which is visited, frequented, and revered by people from all faith, whether Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikh. Whoever comes there, find a place of peace, solace within themselves. So reflecting that as a diverse nation, India, where even at every 100 or 200 kilometers when you travel, the language, the dialect, the food habits, the faith, the clothes changes. Yet such a diverse nation has always been upheld by the values of bhakti, which is seva, and khidmat-e-khalq, which is unconditional love and service towards all creation. As the teachings of Khaja Moinuddin Chishti Gharib Nawaz is one of that once we develop the three attributes of nature into our being, then we can get close to the Creator by serving the creation. And those are sun-like grace, river-like generosity, and earth-like hospitality. And these are the very principles which the Chishti masters have always upheld from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, with a deep resonance and impact on entire Southeast Asia region. Coming back to the ASEAN region, and I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of Ajmer Sharif India. As the Interreligious and Interdialogue Summit, it's crucial for us to come together as a region to foster understanding, respect, and harmony among the diverse cultures and faith. I've put down few notes, that's why I requested to come here and share. Of course, I'll be within the time. Few notes that how the Indic values and the India's message to the world as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is the entire world is one family. And so aptly, it has reflected not only in the present time, but from centuries after centuries into Southeast Asia, in particular ASEAN region. When we talk about the religion aspect of ASEAN region and the connectivity with the Indic tradition as Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism played a significant role in shaping the religious landscape in several Southeast Asian countries, such as Indonesia, Cambodia, Thailand, and Myanmar. Many ancient temples and religious structures reflect the architectural and artistic style inspired by the Indic traditions. When we visited Bali last year, or the R20 summit, I was pleasantly surprised to see those Indian traditions of Ramayana, Mahabharata being played out, which I have not grown up seeing in India, seeing that unique style. Then again, when we come to the language and the script, Sanskrit played as an ancient Indian language, has played an important impact on development of script and vocabulary in some of the Southeast Asian languages. For example, the Khmer script in Cambodia and Thai script in Thailand have borrowed elements of the ancient Brahmi script. Arts and culture has a deep impact, as I just mentioned about the Mahabharata and Ramayana played during in Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia. Another point is important for the ASEAN region to reflect and have this connectivity, which our leadership in India, the Prime Minister's office, specifically insists about the Trade and Commerce Initiative, which has a long shared history of maritime trade in Southeast Asia, which really facilitate the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between two regions. As we further move ahead with the literature and the epics, which is so prominently respected here, even the name, as just Ambassador Sidharto mentioned his own experience, that in India, people are surprised that a Muslim having a name. So this is that connectivity that needs to be rethought, redeveloped into our present times. Even when we talked about the traditional medicine and the healing practices, Ayurveda, it has a deep influence among the practices in Southeast Asian countries, leading to the adoption of herbal remedies and the holistic healthcare approaches. Again, festivals and celebration, which binds us uniquely as well. That's like the Indian festival like Diwali, Holi, and Vaisakhi, which is also celebrating the birth of Lord Buddha, are observed and celebrated in communities in certain ASEAN countries, demonstrating the continued relevance of Indic cultural traditions. Again, when we go talk about the architectural design, this is so important that has been inter-exchange through the trade routes and the architectural designs in the element of Indian arts and artifacts throughout the cultural institutions in ASEAN region and the countries. One of the last points that I experienced just recently when I was in Yogyakarta, we went to the main Sultan Mosque, and after that I saw some of the school students practicing their parade for the Independence Day. And I was pleasantly surprised that they were practicing on the Indian famous song of Jai Ho, which is the famous composer by A.R. Rahman. So that Indian Jai Ho song is being practiced at the Independence Day March by the young children. So that Bollywood influence is very appreciative, and I think across Southeast Asia and ASEAN region, this plays an important, significant impact. From the Indian perspective, again, restoring civilizational connectivity between South and Southeast Asia has significant importance, and time and again our leadership has been very much putting an importance, both from Indonesia perspective or Indian perspective. The leadership has been insisting on realizing and enhancing the connectivity between South and Southeast Asia to promote this shared legacy of spiritual traditions and spiritual unity. I would really extend our greetings and wish that this forum is the beginning of a long connectivity and continuity of sharing that spiritual heritage and the spiritual unity with the diverse element, yet the importance of oneness, that oneness of being that we all experience throughout. And Indonesia, my first experience to be here was in 2014, when I was again invited at a premiere of an Indonesian film, which was partly shot in India. I was just yesterday talking about it, but that is the impact of art, culture, and even film institutions, if we shared so impactfully, that many people start recognizing, talking about it. The famous film was Haji Backpacker, where the dream interpreter, a teacher, was from India. So an Indonesian actor also comes to Ajmer Sharif, where his dream, where he was seeing that he's been falling down from a balloon, a hot air balloon, and that was interpreted in Ajmer Sharif. And then he took that journey from Ajmer Sharif to Hajj. So that is how I think very impactful when we look at the shared civilization. And as Ajmer Sharif has always upheld those values, and even today, when the world is facing challenges, and in terms of religion, extremism, radicalization, I think the spiritual unity and the uniqueness of the diverse tradition that can really minimize and bring together the community's culture and religion to the moderate path and the path of moderation, which in the morning, Honorable His Excellency President Joko Widodo insisted about the interfaith dialogues, intercultural exchange, and we wish again all the best and lots of du'as and prayers. I close my remarks, because I know time is limited, with the most famous poetry of Rumi, where he talked about oneness and together and unity, which he says, Baza, baza, haranche hasti baza, sadbar, gar tauba shikasti baza, idarga ma, na umidi nist, idarga ma, umidast, umidast, umidast. Come, come, come. Whoever you are, come. Even if you have broken your vows of repentance 100 times, come. Our doors are not the doors of despair. Our doors are the doors of hope, hope, and hope. And truly, inshallah, we believe that together, with one voice, we can open these doors of hope to the entire world, from ASEAN countries, from Indonesia to India. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you.
Given time constraints, I'm sure we could listen to all of our speakers for much longer time, but I also want to leave some time for questions from the floor. I shall, but I would like to ask, before we open questions from the floor, I would like to ask one more question to Sidharto. Indonesia, if we look at the history of Indonesia, perhaps Indonesia's biggest impact on the world stage, where Indonesia was most visible, was during the era of Bung Karno, Sukarno. Mary Ann Glendon mentioned the Bandung Conference, which gave birth to the Bandung Statement, the Bandung Movement, the Non-Aligned Movement. And our guest, Sidharto, I believe early in your career, you served at the Non-Aligned Movement. So I'm curious whether, in terms of the potentials in today's world, obviously at that era the concerns were decolonialization, eliminating the vestiges of imperialism, also avoiding competition between the power blocks and a lot of economic issues. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, given the fact that Indonesia's foreign policy motto, I believe, is bebas aktif, active but free of alignment, and this also seems to be characteristic of ASEAN in general. I'm wondering whether pursuing shared civilizational values, the noble values that lie within religion, whether this has any relevance from your point of view to the world at large and the role of ASEAN on the world stage.
let me attempt to connect two major points. The first is that with the revival of, call it the Cold War, or call it dynamic multipolarity, or, but in essence, the New World situation today. What is happening, I think also, this revival of, it could be of non-alignment, it could be, but in essence, it's a form of neutralism that many countries, not least ASEAN countries, would choose, but they have not really termed it so, would choose to be or to take a form of being neutral. Now, neutral, this is a form or a position in which we are, this is not about neutral against one side or the other, but it's about being neutral against the situation they are in. So it is also, and I think this is coming to my second point, where religion really plays a role. It's in that, in terms of morality. Earlier it was also discussed about the importance of morality, and I think there is that revival of the importance of morality in a number of parts of the world. So we, in terms of morality, we don't see politics as being necessarily evil or angel and the devil, but about doing what is right and what is wrong. Politics today may run into the risk of putting the other side as being the devil, and therefore we do not talk to the devil. What is important now is when it comes to morality, what grounds you are standing on, and therefore it's about how to avoid the greatest evil of all, which is war. And I think this is the moral grounds in which neutrality would stand on. And I think there are efforts now to strengthen, to develop the conceptual framework. And this is not only in ASEAN, but I think it's also around many parts of the world that is taking place.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, we'll end the panel. We may have a couple minutes here. Questions. I notice the Cardinal has a question you may have for one of our panelists. There's a microphone that could be made available. Here, I'll give you mine.
This is for our Indian speaker. How do ordinary Indians look at the ban on converting tribals or Adivasi? And the second is, how do they think about the persecution of Christians by one of the ethnic groups in India, Hindus?
The first part of the question was?
The first question was, how do people in India think about, the second was the question about treatment of Christians, the ban on conversion. This is it. The first question was related to ban on conversion in some places, or difficulty in converting from one religion to another. How do Indians view this? And the second was, how do people in India view issue of persecution of people of other faiths?
Well, when we talk about Indian Constitution gives every Indian equal right to profess and propagate any religion that they are in or they are part of. So the Indian Constitution always have been upholding the human values since the independence in 1947. And there are some isolated incidents on issues of religious identification, I think there is a apt policies of Indian law and order system which is in place, which can be recourse at any time. So the Indian constitution is fully equipped with dealing such law and order situations. And I think there are some isolated incidents at times happen in the name of religion and faith, and which is not should be perceived as a general happening in different parts of India, because India is a very diverse and huge nation, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Rajasthan to Bengal. We do acknowledge that there should be no persecution in the name of religion, in the name of faith, and as per the rights and constitutional guarantee to each and every Indian to preach and profess the religion that they are in and they belong to, and that is upheld by the highest constitutional values across India.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. We have time for one last question before we move to the closing ceremony. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a question? If I'm missing it, I don't necessarily see anyone. There is someone. Is there? Oh, the lady. Okay, I cannot see. But oh, there she is. Okay. Let me give you a microphone. Oh, there it is. Microphone's coming.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good late afternoon, everyone. I would like to highlight on the post-pandemic issues. We all know that the pandemics brought us a lot of miseries, and thanks God that it's ended or it's faded away last semester. Hence, we are having this all kind of wonderful fora. The pandemics also shed a light on the democracies that we have in our respective countries. For example, it highlighted the asymmetries, the asymmetric imbalances among different communities, etc. And we witness that the miseries and human sadness brought about the pandemic still continues. My question is, what is the roles of religions and faith-based organization in addressing the asymmetry, especially when it's construed by the structural violence, be it the state actors or perhaps the religious organizations? With this question, I would like to challenge us to be self-critical regarding our own, perhaps, biases towards the poor, the vulnerables, the fragiles, the disenfranchised communities among us. This question is addressed to all the speakers. Bottom line is, I would like to put in the theory of rational based conflict, rational conflict theory, yeah, that creates a lot of imbalances and how we religions collaborate on eradicating that. Thank you. My name is Yaya Hisbia, and I'm from Muhammadiyah Central Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gusmão, would you like to give a brief response before we close the session?
Maybe religion and politics have the same, the common ground, that they are all dealing with common good. This is what I believe in. The point is that when religion becomes part of ideology, then it is already become as like fighting to reach the power. And this is the problem which we face in many of the regime which employ religion as or instrumentalize religion as part of reaching the power. And I think this is so many experience which time by time is reduced. It's not as bad as in the Middle middle age. But I think we are working on this. So the proposal to work on interreligious and intercultural connectivity is a huge, how do we say, a huge ambience to work out, and we need time and time. I like the word connectivity, which we mean the connection cannot stop in one point. You have always like going on and going on. It is like an ongoing formation. So once you stop, then the dialogue is finished.
Thank you very much.
Well, I think this is an important question about addressing the issue of persecution on the name of religion. I think we have to all collectively understand and realize and also reflect on our daily life. As the Quranic verses of the like, Rafiddin, let there be no compulsion in the matter of faith. Conflict and violence and hate emerges when we insist or when we talked about compulsion in the matter of faith and religion. And it is a collective voice and the act of kindness, compassion that can be shared widely. And in today's digital age, when any image of violence, any image of persecution, any image of isolated incident, whether in the name of religion or faith, that becomes viral in the social media, in the digital spaces. But at the same time, hundreds and millions of act of kindness, act of sharing, act of giving, act of oneness, and sharing the unity in diversity gets unnoticed, and it's never shared far and wide. So it is our collective responsibility, along with the statehood, the leadership of the nation, that let's share and insist on the act of kindness and oneness. And certainly with these initiatives, we can overcome the isolated acts of persecution in the name of religion and faith, which is very important to deal on the immediate concern.
Thank you, Sheikh Salman, for allowing us to end on that note. Thank you, Bapak Gusmão. Thank you, Bapak Sidharto. I hope all of you will join me in giving a round of applause to these speakers.
Thank you to our panelists today. We would like to give a token of appreciation for this session. The token of appreciation will be handed over by Haji Kholil Nafis, Supreme Council of Nahdlatul Ulama. Once again, thank you to all the panelists and the speakers that have attended and contributed to the ASEAN Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Conference 2023. We are coming to the end of the conference, and to end that, I would like to invite Kiai Haji Yahya Kholil Stakuf to provide the closing remarks of the event.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah, syukurullah, salatu salam ala rasulullah, Sayyidina Maulana Muhammad ibn Abdullah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa wala. Ma'abad. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and participants, there is no greater happiness today than seeing our conference went very well and very, very productive. I can see and feel the spirit, the great spirit of all the speakers and participants to have a truly honest discussion in seeking for a way out, for a solution for our problems. This kind of initiative, people would say, is one of a kind of public diplomacy. And I, on behalf of Nahdlatul Ulama, years ago, already stated publicly that public diplomacy is an important part of Nahdlatul Ulama agendas, and Nahdlatul Ulama's diplomacy is complete honesty, because what we want to pursue with our diplomacy is solution to our problems. And solution can never be achieved without honestly dealing with the problem, honestly acknowledging the problems. And I believe this is what we've been doing all this day. So I want to express my utmost gratitude to all of you, dear speakers and participants, for all that you have done today. I believe that what we achieved today is something that bears a significant meaning in the struggle of religions, the struggle of humanity for a better future for all humanity, for the global civilization. I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of Nahdlatul Ulama to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and especially His Excellency Mr. Sidharto, Director General of ASEAN in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Pak Sidharto and his staffs has been working very closely hand to hand with our friends in Nahdlatul Ulama and Center for Shared Civilizational Values in processing all the preparation and conceptual development of this initiative. And also I would like to express my gratitude to our friends from the Center for Shared Civilizational Values, Pak Haji Muhammad Kholil, aka Charles Holland Taylor, Pak Timothy Samuel Shah, Pak Professor Robert Hefner, Pak Thomas Dinham, and also, of course, a great contribution has been given by our dear friend, Professor Mary Ann Glendon of Harvard University. Thank you very much for everything. This is not just an idea of a conference. This is all a struggle as a movement, reaching out as widely as we can to every community, to every religious leader, to every people of goodwill, to join for a common struggle together, to fight for a better future for our global civilization, to struggle for a civilization in the future which is embodied in an international order, a true, just and harmonious international order founded upon respect for equal right and dignity of every human being. So again, thank you very much. We praise God Almighty for the help that is given to us, the blessing that is given to us to have this conference, and we surely pray for more help from heaven for our future struggle from here. Tomorrow morning, I would invite you to spare more time with us to discuss about a follow-up from here, what we can do next together. I think this is going to be one of important step of our engagement. We did this before, and we surely hope that tomorrow in our discussion we can find an idea or even an agreement among us to do together something that we can do together after this. So again, thank you. We wish you a safe travel back home to where you come from, and we surely hope that this will not be the only chance, the only time we meet and gather together. We surely wish that after this, we'll have more and more opportunities to meet again, to gather again, and to work together in our common struggle. Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And well, this is not farewell yet. We still have dinner together tonight, and we still hopefully have you again tomorrow morning in our discussion. But for the conference, I think we already come to the end of this conference. let us close this conference with praise to God. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Kami mohon kepada delegasi Laos sebagai keketuaan ASEAN 2024. Baik, sekali lagi tepuk tangan yang meriah. Inilah serah terima Pataka kepada delegasi Laos sebagai keketuaan ASEAN 2024. Baik, selanjutnya kami persilakan untuk dapat berkenan berfoto bersama. Baik, terima kasih. Selanjutnya kami persilahkan berkenan untuk dapat kembali ke tempat.
To the Venerable Dr. Van Keo Bandit from Laos, we would like to hear a few words from you to close the ceremony.
Honorable guests, esteemed religious leader, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is an auspicious day for us all today that we gather here and come together and discuss the harmonious society, harmonious ASEAN, seeking the common ground that we can live together harmoniously. We, representative from Lao PDR, as among community, as among delegate from Lao PDR, as very small organization, but in Laos, Buddhism is prominence or biggest religions in Laos. So it is an honor and very biggest privilege to be able to address at this closing after receiving the baton of ASEAN intercultural and interreligious dialogue. We hope that in the coming year that Lao will be the ASEAN chair and we can put this agenda. We hopefully that it will happen so that our ASEAN nation, ASEAN countries can be living in the harmonies, seeking the common ground, living in tolerance, and be prosperous in every aspect. So we are grateful and very honored, and we would like to say thanks and express our gratitude to all the committees, organizing committees, and the very excellent host today for receiving us. And we hope that in the future we can work together and come together, share the same ideas, share the same background, and we live happily. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and it is an honor and a privilege to be reading this declaration, being a very proud citizen of the ASEAN. We, the religious and cultural leaders from every ASEAN member state, as well as from ASEAN Plus and other nations, have convened in Jakarta, Indonesia, under the auspices of the world's largest Muslim organization, Indonesia's Nahdlatul Ulama, with the support of the government of Indonesia during its chairmanship of ASEAN. Having carefully considered the present state of affairs within our region and the world at large, as well as the rich civilizational legacy that we have inherited from past generations, we do hereby observe and acknowledge that, first, the nations of ASEAN and the Indo-Pacific region are increasingly important actors upon the world stage. Second, at the same time, geopolitical and socioeconomic developments, including ethnic and religious conflict, poverty, environmental degradation, and health emergencies, pose significant challenges to the maintenance of security, peace, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and worldwide. Third, to successfully navigate these challenges, governments need the cooperation of stakeholders at every level of society, including effective engagement with and support from religious organizations endowed with spiritual authority and a mass following. Fourth, ASEAN has the potential to facilitate the peaceful navigation of regional challenges, as it consists of countries that have traditionally shared a similar set of civilizational values, deeply rooted within their respective societies. These values foster a culture of tolerance and harmony while reducing conflict between groups. Fifth, moral education, the development of noble character, and the practice of virtue were integral to the ways of life of local peoples across Southeast Asia and to the indigenization of Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and other religions following their arrival within the region. Sixth, it is of the utmost importance that ASEAN member states cooperate to revitalize the civilizational mentality or worldview that was long characteristic of Southeast Asia prior to the modern era. This civilizational mentality is characterized by a willingness to accept differences while preserving and strengthening harmony among society's diverse elements. Seventh, the long history of largely peaceful coexistence between various cultures in Southeast Asia offers a model through which ASEAN and its member states may address a wide range of geopolitical and socioeconomic developments that pose significant challenges to the peace, security, and prosperity of Southeast Asia, while hampering the achievement of ASEAN's Social Development Goals, or SDG 2030, and post-2030 goals. Eighth, open, constructive, and respectful interreligious and intercultural dialogue is essential if we are to promote and cultivate tolerance, respect, and a culture of peace, and thereby facilitate better understanding among peoples within our individual nations, within ASEAN, and throughout the world at large. Ninth, various initiatives are already underway, including the work of the United Nations, the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations, and the Bali Democracy Forum provide a welcome contribution to strengthening tolerance, democracy, and respect for human rights through interreligious and intercultural dialogue. Noteworthy among these initiatives are UN resolutions on promoting a culture of peace and tolerance to safeguard religious rights, promotion of interreligious and intercultural dialogue, understanding and cooperation for peace, promoting interreligious and intercultural dialogue and tolerance in countering hate speech, adopted by the Security Council at its 9,347th meeting on the 14th of June 2023, fostering a culture of peace and the establishment of World Interfaith Harmony Week. Further, a declaration by ASEAN leaders titled Culture of Prevention for a Peaceful, Inclusive, Resilient, Healthy, and Harmonious Society and Plans of Action for Promoting this agenda. The ASEAN Community's post-2025 vision and attended documents as envisioned in the Hanoi Declaration on the ASEAN Community's post-2025 vision, including the ongoing work of the high-level task force on the ASEAN Community's post-2025 vision, as well as the SDG 2030 and post-2030 agenda. The Abu Dhabi Declaration on Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living Together, and finally, the establishment in June 2021 of the Center for Shared Civilizational Values by the world's largest Muslim organization, Indonesia's Nahdlatul Ulama. Deeply conscious of these circumstances and trends, we, the religious and cultural leaders from every ASEAN member state, as well as from ASEAN Plus and other nations, do hereby, first, agree to assume shared responsibility to foster an inclusive, sustainable, resilient, dynamic, and harmonious ASEAN community that is capable of peacefully navigating current and future challenges within the region and beyond. Second, we invite other religious, cultural, and political leaders, as well as people of goodwill of every faith and nation, to join in transforming Southeast Asia into an epicentrum of harmony based on a legacy of shared civilizational values. And third, we pledge to cooperate in consolidating the ASEAN region as a cohesive, vital, and proactive civilizational sphere which functions as a powerful, independent pillar of support for a rules-based international order. In pursuit of these objectives, the ASEAN Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Conference 2023 proposes the development of an operational framework to advance this agenda in the following distinctive areas. People-to-people connectivity. Encourage cultural and religious leaders to cooperate with governments in fostering mutual understanding and harmony among the diverse religious communities and cultures of ASEAN by enhancing people-to-people connectivity at the national, regional, and global levels. To invite the peoples and governments of ASEAN to join in facilitating the emergence of a global movement in which people of goodwill of every faith and nation will help bring the world's geopolitical and economic power structures into alignment with the highest moral and spiritual values for the sake of all of humanity. And I'm quoting from Haji Kholil Stakuf, General Chairman of the Nahdlatul Ulama Central Board. Also to acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to help ensure that our respective religions function as a genuine and dynamic source of solutions rather than problems upon the world stage. And further, to agree to forge concrete avenues of cooperation among ASEAN's diverse religious communities based upon shared and moral spiritual values. Finally, to invite like-minded cultural and religious leaders throughout Southeast Asia to foster a renewed appreciation for the principles and respect for pluralism that were once defining features of this region. For women and youth, first, to affirm the vital importance of women and their role within society, including but not limited to the inculcation of noble values within each successive generation of youth. To recognize that effective character education provides a holistic approach to addressing numerous social problems because mature, responsible individuals contribute to the well-being of society. We likewise urge government leaders to strengthen character education within the national curricula of ASEAN member states so that youth may successfully adapt to the modern world while simultaneously developing a way of life that imparts the inner resources, character, and resilience required to overcome the negative influences of modernity and globalization, including sociocultural dislocation, alienation from family and society at large, criminality and drug use, educational failure, violent extremism, and the rise of psychological illness among the youth. And finally, to encourage youth and youth adults to participate actively in efforts to build intercultural and interreligious understanding and harmony within the societies of ASEAN and the region as a whole. For intergovernmental cooperation, we commit to help develop and implement concrete initiatives and government policies that will build bridges of mutual understanding and respect between the peoples and cultures of ASEAN, the Indo-Pacific region, and the world at large. We also invite governments and civil society institutions to help project ASEAN's cultural and religious soft power globally through the movement for shared civilizational values, which seeks to preserve and strengthen a rule-based international order founded upon universal ethics and humanitarian values. We likewise express our full support for the government of Indonesia's chairmanship of ASEAN 2023, including its efforts to ensure that the Association of Southeast Asian Nations remains credible, relevant, and beneficial for its people, the region, and the world at large, while continuing to serve as an epicentrum of growth and prosperity. We also express our appreciation to the government of Indonesia for its support in convening the ASEAN Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Conference as one of several public events held under Indonesia's ASEAN chairmanship in 2023. And finally, we emphasize the importance of a regular, institutionalized mechanism to discuss and promote intercultural and interreligious cooperation in Southeast Asia and explore possible avenues within the structures of ASEAN to establish the ASEAN Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Conference as an annual forum in order to facilitate ongoing cooperation between individuals, religious communities, civil society organizations, media outlets, and governments throughout ASEAN, ASEAN Plus member states, and beyond. Drafted and finalized in Jakarta, Indonesia on 7th of August, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. To officiate the ASEAN IIDC Jakarta Declaration, Dr. Teresita Cruz del Rosario will hand over the Jakarta Declaration to Sidharto Suryodipuro, Director General of ASEAN Cooperations, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Your Excellency, the stage is yours. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Excellency.
Baik Bapak dan Ibu yang kami hormati, tibalah kita di penghujung acara. Terima kasih kami ucapkan atas partisipasi Anda di acara ASEAN Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Conference 2023. Sebelum kita akhiri, ada beberapa hal yang perlu kami informasikan. Yang pertama, bahwa kami mohon alat interpreter dapat dikembalikan di meja masing-masing. Yang kedua, setelah ini akan dilaksanakan press conference di Mutiara 5 dan juga nanti pada pukul 7 akan dimulai gala dinner di tempat ini. Terima kasih.
We have reached the end of our event today. Thank you for your participation in the ASEAN Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue Conference 2023. We do hope that we can build an epicentrum of harmony to foster peace, security, and prosperity among ASEAN nations. There are a few announcements before I close it. The first, for anyone who is holding on to an interpreter device, to please return to the table. Second, there is a press conference that is happening right after the closing ceremony, and it will be in Mutiara 5 on floor 3, on the 3rd floor. And lastly, there will be a gala dinner at 7 p.m. In the same ballroom. I, Nabila Ernada, and my partner for today, Ahmad Fariul Badi, is signing off. Enjoy the rest of the day and good afternoon.
Baik, terima kasih kami ucapkan. Mohon maaf atas segala kekurangan. Terima kasih atas segala perhatian. Akhirul kalam, wallahul muwaffiq ila aqwamit thoriq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.